Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. I got an 800 ETEC here. It's a free ride, and customer wants basically a preseason maintenance and an entire look over. So I'm gonna show you guys what I do for preseason maintenance on these things. A lot of people do them differently, but I'm gonna try to. And a lot of stuff you don't have to do every year, but I'm just gonna kind of go through everything as if the sled's never been serviced. This is going to be less of a how-to because I have a bunch of how-to videos on how to do a bunch of these individual items. But it's going to be more of just like a overview of everything I do at the beginning of the season. First thing I'm doing is Chaincase oil. I got the other half of the case kind of draining out. They hold some metal and crap in there. And then obviously it's just a bunch of 10 millimeters around the side. You take the can off, take the battery off, and that's it. So you're going to want to also check the chain tension. So you're going to take a 17 millimeter wrench, crack this guy loose, and I like to give it like a turn and a half or something like that. And then you're going to go as far as you can in with your finger. See, that's pretty tight. That's not so bad. I might try to get on it with a plier to make sure that the whole thing's actually loose. But you're going to want to go in as tight as you can, finger tight, and that's it. And then tighten the 17 millimeter back down. These XPs take 12 ounces. And you fill it right from that plug on the top. It's a good idea to pull that out when you got the case off. And normally you fill it until it comes out of this plug side. But I couldn't get that plug out, so I'm putting a measured amount in. It turns out it's like 12 ounces. So now we're gonna move over to the clutches. I like to prop these sleds up on their side. I throw like a 4-inch tall block and hit the running board on this side, and now you could very easily get the stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this belt off using the stock clutch tool. Just keep cranking it in, and then the belt will work its way off. Then I'm going to go ahead and pop the clutch off. I'm going to use the water trick. I have a video on that too. And I'm going to go through cleaning the clutches for sure, but I also want to get to this side and do the PTO ISOFlex grease. And should do that every 3,000 miles, but I'm assuming the sled's never been serviced like this before. The kid just bought it, so I'm going to go after that. Now that we have the belt off, just want to look it over. I try to bend it and look for like odd cracks and any irregularities in the belt surface. This is an alright belt surface or a belt siding, so you're going to want to check it all the way around, obviously both sides. And you're obviously going to check the teeth on the very base, the inside, and if it has any odd wear marks like that, you see how it's kind of worn more on that side than that side. I don't get too concerned about it. I would run a belt like this because these teeth don't spend too much time actually riding on anything, so that would be the time you're at idle, and it spends its time on the base of the clutch on the one-way bearing, so nothing to be majorly concerned with on this belt. So you're definitely going to want to clean off your clutches before the season. I take some Scotch-Brite, and I go in like a kind of like a right angle pattern, almost like a cross hatching, and you're going to kind of try to create something like that. You can kind of see the cross hatching going like that. I got some more to do because that's obviously just belt gunk being burned onto there. And you're going to want to do that with your secondary clutch also. And then when you're done with it, just definitely blow it out if you're not going to throw them in the dishwasher or something like that. Hot soapy water is the best to clean your clutches. Make sure you also check for any irregularities in the clutch faces. So you want a smooth transition in to out, and cracks are very important to look for because the clutches will explode. These sheaves look really good, and you never use any grease on these things. These things are completely dry, nothing that'll burn anything right out of them. So don't use anything. An important thing to check before you start the season too is belt deflection. So that belt deflection basically refers to how much of this you can do, how much slack you have between, the primary and secondary clutch belt. So you'll notice you can kind of see that little ridge. So the valley of this belt notch should pretty much be flush with the outer diameter of the secondary clutch. So if you just took your belt off, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to roll it over with the track free. You can kind of see. And you'll see the clutch start to get back to its relaxed position. And this is getting pretty close. I did screw with it before I started filming. But what you're going to do is you're going to loosen up that 4mm Allen right there with the captured nut on the other side. And then you're going to turn it right using the provided tool they give you. Well, we'll get it on there somehow. We'll lose a finger like this. Or left. I think it's left. You're going to turn it left, and what you'll notice is this nut will all but come loose. And then you want to turn over the belt again. Doesn't matter which way, by the way. It's all just going to normalize the clutch, and you'll notice that we're starting to peak over the top, and you want to just do that until it's flush. What this does is it basically compensates for your belt wearing. So as your belt is going to wear on these sides, it's going to get a little smaller and it's going to sink down lower. So you're going to have more slack than normal. So it actually goes right. I don't know if I misspoke before, but it goes, you turn it right to tighten the sheaves up, you roll it over, and you'll notice I went a little too far there. So I'm going to have to turn it back left. Going to have to turn this back left and then roll it over again and check. You got to tighten up that 4mm Allen and you're good to go. So you'll see it's almost pretty much perfect. Probably the most neglected fluid in any vehicle is brake fluid. Most people just act like it never has to be changed or anything like that, but brake fluid collects water, and I don't think it'd ever rot out a line in one of these things, but it will get hot and expand and clamp your brakes shut pretty much. And it won't be drastic. It's just one of those things that gets really hot. It'll warp a rotor. It's just not good. So I like to bleed the just basically do a complete brake flush on these. I use .3. You just crack that 8mm loose, and I run a little tube down to a reservoir and just keep an eye on it. You got to keep this reservoir full. Just going to run a few master cylinders worth of fluid through that. I don't know if I already said it, but .3. And then just close it up and you're done. Just make sure not to touch this brake lever while you're doing it, because you're going to introduce air into the system. So while we're on the subject of brakes, you're definitely going to want to give these a quick look over. Brakes don't go often on these, but you can kind of peek through the side and see that the pads are good. You can peek through the other side and see that the other pad is good also. These are dual piston calipers, so one side can hang up and one side can work, and you'll have uneven wear. You're going to want to take a quick look at the rotor. The only reason I'm not pulling off this cover is because the screws are stripped, and they look fine as is, so I'm not even going to bother, but that's something to check too. So as sad as it is, ETECs tend to foul plugs a lot more than the carb sleds. They're very picky about fuel, specifically water in the fuel, and that sucks because they're like $27 plugs. So I'm going to pull them out and at the very least clean them off. These things are very sensitive to nasty plugs too. They take the iridium whatevers. So these are really gross. They're a spare set, if barely. So you can kind of see, trying to get it to focus, you can kind of see the electrode at the very end right there is pretty worn out. And obviously it's covered in oil and crap. That I don't know if this sled was even summarized, but if it was, that's what it would look like if it was summarized. But they're also pretty carboned up, and the carbon looks dry and old. So it's definitely time to replace these. I also just try to replace these at the very last chance I get, like the weekend before I go riding, pretty much, because you're going to have junk fuel in here. You're going to have to run it around. So I know ETEC guys like to pretend the fuel doesn't matter, but you do need to drain these. Keep as little fuel as you can in them over the summer, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw some heat in this thing, just the fuel stabilizer that is, so it will just get rid of some of the water, and that tends to help. Okay, here goes another thing that people pretend doesn't exist. So you got a fuel filter on this thing, obviously, right here, as I squirt my phone with fuel. And it definitely needs to be replaced. The Napa part or Wix part number is 33095. And basically what you got to do is you got to remove it from the PCM right there, and then obviously back it out, and then you can kind of force the fuel filter back behind and then scoot it out this way. Now you have access to both these high pressure clamps. Lift the tabs on the high pressure clamps, they pop off, and then throw some hose clamps on them when you're done, and that's your fuel filter. You'll probably see it on the forums a lot where everybody's talking about how their sled's bogging and they don't know why and blah blah blah. Usually these filters are disgusting when they get cut open, so just not every season, but often. All right, it's time to get into suspension stuff. Probably the first thing I'm going to tackle, I'm going to go to the skid. I flipped it on its side again, And the reason for that is just so I can get a little closer to it, and check the high facts and check all the bushings and stuff like that. So obviously you're just going to want to check your idler wheels and check for any lateral play, like almost like as if you're checking a wheel bearing. They're all going to have a little bit of play because they're not actually on bearings. They're just kind of there. Inner and outer. And then you're going to start looking at the high facts. So these high facts actually need to be replaced. You can see right there, there's a line. You can kind of tell where the rollers are, but you can see the line there, and then you follow it, and then the line goes away. So these high facts need to be replaced. They're pretty cheap, just to screw in the front, and then they slide right out the back. There are pretty much only like 2 grease fittings on this whole suspension. So there's one up on top of the arm linkage, and then one right down there. So I usually fill them with marine grease only because it seems to be somewhat waterproof. I use it on almost everything. And then obviously just check your drivers, make sure they don't have any cracks or anything like that in them. These seem fine, but the track tension is a little loose, so that's going to result in that sort of like, it almost looks like burnt plastic right there, but that's what that will result in. So as for front suspension, it's just like a car. If you ever worked on a car, you just want to check for looseness. And obviously you have pretty much a conventional ball joint down here and here, no grease fittings, nothing. Just want to make sure everything's tight, because you see this on ATVs and snowmobiles a lot. They catch so much vibration that these bolts, even though they're nylock, come loose. Everything in the front end of this sled is tight, except for I'm starting to notice it probably needs ski bushings. It has some play right there. I'm going to see if I can tighten it up instead, but it seems okay. Also going to want to check the bulkhead for pulls, cracks, bends, anything like that, because you don't want it to come apart at like 100 miles an hour or something like that. I've never seen the rivets pop on these, but it's pretty commonplace for rivets to pop. And this whole thing's pretty much riveted together. This, I think they call it the S module, as in, for a suspension, obviously. And that will crack if it's taken a shot or something like that. So this is important to look at, just inspect, make sure it doesn't have a crack. Aluminum doesn't bend too well. Obviously, the easiest thing to check is carbides. So you can kind of see, most carbides look pretty gross, but the host bar is not even worn into. God, I can't really get this to focus. Yeah, so that you can see the carbides are still kind of there. This is better than most that I've seen, and you'll look and see that the ski isn't in too bad a shape either. Track tension is important to check. You're supposed to have a 1 1/4 inch space between the bottom of the high facts to the track, and this track is propped up, and there's no tension on it. You can do whatever with it. So that's kind of what you want it to look like. It's pretty close. Obviously, you're going to want to measure it. I don't have a tape measure on hand at the moment. And all you're going to have to do to tighten up the track or loosen it or whatever you got to do with it is just, righty-tighty with this 10-millimeter bolt. And you're going to do the exact same on the other side. You obviously want to keep them even. And that's all there is to track tension. That'll keep you from slipping over the drivers up front. And that's all there is.